I'm going to lay out the evidence, piece by piece, and let you be the judge, because I think what I found here is genuinely one of the clearest cases of formula copying I've seen at this price point. And by the end of this video, I don't think you're going to disagree with me. Here's the setup. This is a $54 hydrating serum from a well-known skincare brand. It's one of their best sellers. It's been all over social media for the last couple of years. And this is a $1.50 serum from Dollar Tree that showed up on shelves more recently. Same category, hydrating serum, similar packaging style, similar marketing language on the box. But packaging and marketing copy each other constantly in this industry. That alone doesn't prove anything. Brands imitate each other's visual language, their fonts, their bottle shapes, their color palettes, all the time, without any actual formula overlap underneath. So let's actually look at what's inside the bottle, because that's where the real evidence is, and where a genuine case either holds up or falls apart entirely. Before I start, I want to be upfront about my methodology here, because I think it matters for how much weight you put on what follows. I'm working entirely from the ingredient lists printed on both packages, which by law have to list every ingredient in descending order of concentration. I don't have access to either company's actual formulation records, their supplier contracts, or any internal documentation. Nobody doing this kind of consumer comparison video does. So what I'm building here is a case based on publicly available evidence, not a confirmed internal paper trail. I think that's still a genuinely useful thing to do, but I want that limitation on the table from the very start rather than pretending I have more certainty than I actually do. I also want to explain briefly why I picked this specific pair of products for this kind of deep, evidence-based comparison rather than just any random serum off the shelf. This particular expensive serum has been one of the most talked about, most reviewed hydrating serums on social media for a couple of years running now, which means its ingredient list is genuinely well documented and easy to verify independently. You don't have to just take my word for what's printed on that box. You can look it up yourself in about 30 seconds. That gives this comparison a level of verifiability that a lot of similar videos, frankly, don't bother to provide. Exhibit 1. The front label claims. The expensive serums box says, and I'm reading this directly, hydrates and repairs the skin barrier with ceramides and blueberry extract. The Dollar Tree box says, hydrating serum with ceramides and blueberry extract for barrier support. Same two named ingredients, in the same order, making almost the same specific claim about barrier repair. Blueberry extract is not a common skincare ingredient. It's actually a fairly unusual choice. Most brightening or antioxidant serums reach for more common options like green tea extract or vitamin C instead. Seeing this exact, less common ingredient called out by name on both boxes in the same position in the marketing copy is the first real piece of evidence here. This isn't a coincidence you'd expect from two brands independently landing on the same unusual formulation choice, purely by chance, out of dozens of possible antioxidant botanicals they each could have picked instead. Exhibit 2, the actual ingredient list, not just the marketing claims on the front. Because front of package copy is marketing, and marketing gets imitated constantly without any real formula connection behind it. The ingredient list, on the other hand, is a regulated, legally required disclosure, so this is where genuine evidence actually lives. I'm going to read both, side by side, starting from the top. Water, both. Glycerin, both. Then the expensive serum lists Ceramide NP, Ceramide AP, and Ceramide EOP, three specific, named ceramide types. The Dollar Tree serum lists the exact same three, Ceramide NP, Ceramide AP, Ceramide EOP, in the exact same order. I want to pause here because this detail matters more than people realize. There are dozens of different ceramide types used in skincare. Ceramide 1, Ceramide 2, Ceramide 3, and so on, using the older naming system, or NP, AP, EOP, NS, and several others under the newer naming convention that most modern formulas use. A brand formulating independently could reasonably choose any combination of these. There's no single industry standard combination that every formulator defaults to automatically. Finding this exact same 3-ceramide combination in this exact same order on both labels is a real, specific, and honestly pretty compelling piece of evidence. This is not a broad ingredient like water or glycerin that every product contains. This is a precise, technical formulation choice that required someone, somewhere, to specifically select these 3 types over all the other available options. Exhibit 3. Continuing down the list. Next on the expensive serum, cholesterol, then phytosphingosine. On the Dollar Tree serum, cholesterol, then phytosphingosine. This is actually the third piece of a very specific, very well-known dermatological formulation approach called the ceramide cholesterol fatty acid ratio, sometimes referenced by researchers using something close to a 3-to-1-to-1 ratio, mimicking the natural lipid composition of your skin's own barrier as closely as possible. This isn't a random assortment of moisturizing ingredients thrown together by chance. It's a specific, deliberate formulation strategy that's been published and discussed in dermatology literature for years, specifically because that particular ratio has been shown to support barrier repair more effectively than any single lipid ingredient used alone. Seeing all the same pieces of that specific, named strategy appear in the same order on both labels is Exhibit 3 in this case. And honestly, by this point in my own research, I was starting to think this couldn't just be coincidence. Exhibit 4. Let's talk about the supporting ingredients, because this is where I expected to finally see real divergence between the two products. And largely, I did not. Both list panthenol next, that's provitamin B5, added for its soothing and hydrating properties. Both list sodium hyaluronate after that, a form of hyaluronic acid used specifically for its smaller molecular size and better penetration compared to standard hyaluronic acid. Both list a tocopherol, vitamin E, as an antioxidant addition. At this point, we are 7 ingredients deep on both labels, and every single one has matched, not just in category, but in the specific named ingredient and the specific order those ingredients appear in, which again, is not something you'd expect from 2 completely independent formulation teams working without any shared reference point. Exhibit 5, where the lists finally start to diverge, and I want to give this moment its full due, because up until now this has been an almost uninterrupted string of matches. The expensive serum continues with a proprietary-sounding ingredient the brand calls their signature molecule complex in their marketing, which appears on the ingredient list under a specific fermented ingredient name that isn't disclosed as clearly what it does beyond the marketing description. This is a common practice. Brands will sometimes name a specific fermentation-derived ingredient technically on the label, while reserving the full explanation of what makes it special for their marketing materials, protecting some of the specifics of how it's produced or sourced. The Dollar Tree version does not have an equivalent to this specific ingredient. Its list wraps up shortly after with a standard preservative system and a fragrance ingredient, nothing else notable beyond that point. This is genuinely the first meaningful point of difference between the two formulas, and I want to give it its due weight, because up until this point, the overlap has been almost total, 7 ingredients deep with 0 deviation. This proprietary complex is specifically what the expensive brand emphasizes most heavily in their marketing as their unique differentiator. Their whole brand story practically centers around this one ingredient, and it is, in fact, the one thing that isn't present in the cheaper version. Everything else, the headline actives, the 3-ceramide system, the cholesterol and phytosphingosine, the supporting hydrators, all of it matches, right down to the order they appear in. So let's talk about what this actually means, because I think there are two different, both defensible conclusions you could draw from this evidence, and I want to walk through both honestly, rather than picking the one that makes for a more dramatic video, because I think you deserve a genuinely fair analysis, not just the version of this story that gets the most outraged comments. Conclusion 1. This is intentional reverse engineering. It is entirely possible, and honestly common practice in the cosmetics manufacturing world, for a private label or budget formulator to purchase a popular product, send it to a lab for ingredient analysis, and then formulate a near-identical product built around the same core technical approach, deliberately matching the headline actives while substituting out the one truly proprietary, patented, or trade secret component that they either can't legally replicate or can't source affordably. This happens across the entire consumer goods industry, not just skincare. It happens with snack foods, with cleaning products, with supplements. It's a well-documented, if controversial, business practice sometimes referred to informally as formula benchmarking or competitive analysis in the industry itself. Given how precisely these ceramide types match, in the same order, alongside the identical supporting ingredient cast, this genuinely looks like a plausible example of exactly that practice in action, and if I had to bet on one explanation over the other, this is probably where I'd lean, just based on how specific and how consistently ordered the overlap is across nearly every single ingredient. Conclusion 2, and I want to give this real weight to because I think it's the more charitable and, frankly, the more boring, but possibly more accurate explanation. Both companies could simply be pulling from the same limited pool of commercially available ceramide complexes sold by cosmetic ingredient suppliers. It's entirely possible that a supplier sells a pre-made ceramide NP, AP, EOP plus cholesterol and phytosphingosine complex as a single ready-to-use ingredient blend, specifically marketed to formulators for exactly this kind of barrier repair serum, sold under a branded technical name that both companies purchase in bulk from the same supplier and simply mix into their own base formula alongside their own choice of humectants and preservatives. If that's what happened here, multiple brands buying from the same supplier could end up with extremely similar final ingredient lists without any direct copying of one specific competitor's product, simply because they're both using the same popular, commercially available raw material blend that dozens of other brands across the industry might also be using in their own barrier repair products right now, completely independently of each other. Honestly, without access to either company's actual manufacturing records, which no outside reviewer, myself included, actually has, I can't tell you with complete certainty which of these two explanations is the true one. What I can tell you, with complete confidence, is that the ingredient overlap here is far beyond what you'd expect from coincidence alone, whether that's because of direct reverse engineering or because of a shared, commercially available ingredient complex. The practical result for you as a consumer is genuinely similar either way. You are very likely getting a formulation built around the same core technical approach for a small fraction of the price. And honestly, from a pure value standpoint, the why behind that overlap matters less to your wallet than the fact that it exists at all. Now let's talk about what actually matters most to you watching this. Does it work the same on skin? Because ingredient lists on paper are one thing, actual performance is another, and I don't think this video would be complete as just a label reading exercise without putting both products to a real test. One on each side of my face for a 14-day period. Same cleanser, same sunscreen, same everything else in my routine. Only the serum itself changed side to side. I took a photo every morning under the same window light at roughly the same time each day to keep the lighting conditions as consistent as possible across the full 2 weeks. By day 4, both sides looked noticeably calmer, less flaky around my nose, which is where I typically show the earliest signs of barrier stress when my skin isn't getting adequate lipid support. By day 7, Both sides felt equally soft to the touch, and I genuinely could not identify a texture difference by feel alone with my eyes closed, which I actually tested, having a friend hand me each serum randomly across several days without telling me which was which, and I correctly identified the expensive one only about half the time across multiple attempts, which is essentially a coin flip, statistically no better than random guessing. By day 14, side by side in my final comparison photos, I could not pick a clear winner. If anything, and I want to be honest here because it genuinely surprised me, the Dollar Tree side looked marginally dewier in the final photos, though I genuinely think that's more likely explained by a difference in the occlusive finish of the formula, meaning how it sits on the surface of the skin and reflects light, rather than actual barrier repair happening at a deeper level. That's a texture and finish difference, not necessarily a performance difference, and it's worth being precise about that distinction rather than overstating what a slightly dewier appearance actually tells us. I did not experience any irritation, breakouts, or sensitivity from either product over the full 2 weeks, which is worth mentioning since a poorly reverse-engineered formula, if that's genuinely what happened here, could plausibly introduce stability or purity issues that a well-resourced original formulator might catch and correct for during their own product development and testing process. Issues like inconsistent pH, contamination risk, or unstable emulsification that wouldn't necessarily show up on an ingredient list but could show up as a bad skin reaction. That risk genuinely didn't materialize in my own 2-week test, but I want to be clear that a personal 2-week test on one person's skin is not the same thing as the extensive stability and safety testing a major skincare brand would run before launching a product to millions of customers. So I can't rule out that risk entirely just because I didn't personally encounter it during my own testing window. I also tracked how each serum interacted with the rest of my routine, since real-world compatibility matters just as much as the standalone ingredient list. Both layered cleanly under my regular moisturizer and sunscreen, without any pilling, separation, or that slightly greasy ball-up effect that sometimes happens when incompatible product textures meet on the skin. Neither one interfered with how my makeup applied on top on the days I wore both, which is a practical, real-world detail that a pure ingredient comparison on paper simply can't tell you. So here's my actual verdict, after laying out all 5 pieces of evidence and running my own 2-week wear test. I think the case for meaningful formula overlap here is genuinely strong, stronger than I expected going into this comparison. Honestly, I went in assuming I'd find maybe 2 or 3 matching ingredients and a lot of divergence, not this level of near total overlap across 7 consecutive ingredients. Whether that overlap comes from deliberate reverse engineering or from both brands drawing on the same commercially available ingredient blend, I can't prove with total certainty, and I think it's important to be honest about that limitation, rather than presenting speculation as confirmed fact, especially when I'm making an accusation as serious as the title of this video suggests. What I can tell you with confidence is this. If you're choosing based purely on the ingredients disclosed on both labels and on how each performed on my own skin over 2 weeks, the practical gap between these 2 products is dramatically smaller than the $52.50 price gap between them. The one genuinely proprietary ingredient the expensive brand emphasizes most in their marketing is the one piece missing from the cheaper version. Everything else lines up remarkably closely, ingredient for ingredient, in the same order, down to supporting actives. Most people would never think to compare this carefully. My honest recommendation, if brand experience, that specific proprietary complex, and the reputation of an established company backed by their own clinical testing and quality assurance process matters to you, and for a lot of people that's a completely legitimate thing to value, not just marketing fluff, the expensive version is worth it to you, and there's nothing wrong with that choice. Brand trust and testing history are real, tangible things you're paying for even when the disclosed ingredients look similar on paper. But if you're purely optimizing for the core barrier repair technical approach, the actual ceramide and lipid system doing the heavy lifting here, this is about as close to a genuine dupe as I have personally found in this entire price category, and I've looked at a lot of these comparisons across many different product types by now. I also want to address something specific to this particular product category before I wrap up. Ceramide-based barrier repair serums are, in my opinion, one of the safer categories to feel confident buying the cheaper option in, precisely because the core technology, replenishing your skin's natural lipids, is well established, extensively published in dermatology research, and doesn't rely on some hidden, unverifiable magic that only one company has figured out. Compare that to a category like, say, a specific patented peptide technology, where the exact molecule and its concentration genuinely can be proprietary and difficult to replicate even with a full ingredient list disclosed, and you can see why my confidence in this particular dupe is higher than it would be for every single product category out there. Not every expensive versus cheap comparison is this clean. This one happens to be because of the specific, well-documented nature of the technology involved. I want to end by addressing something I think matters beyond just this one product. This kind of ingredient-level detective work is honestly available to any of you right now, standing in front of any skincare shelf. Flip the box over. Read the actual ingredient list rather than trusting the front-of-package marketing claims, and compare it side by side with whatever more expensive product you're considering. You don't need a lab, you don't need a dermatology degree, you just need to actually read the label and understand that ingredients are listed in descending order of concentration. That alone will tell you more about what you're really paying for than any influencer's opinion, including mine. And it's a skill that pays off in literally every skincare purchase you'll ever make going forward, not just this one comparison. I also want to say something about why this practice, whichever version of it actually happened here, exists in the first place. Because I think it's worth understanding the bigger picture rather than just being outraged at one specific brand. A huge amount of research and development cost in skincare goes into identifying which combinations of ingredients actually work, running the clinical trials, and building consumer trust in a formula over years of marketing and repeat purchases. Once that groundwork is public, and ingredient lists are legally required to be public, it becomes genuinely difficult for the original brand to prevent other companies from building something similar around the same published, well-understood technical approach. Patents can protect specific novel molecules or specific manufacturing processes, but they generally can't protect a general formulation strategy, like combine these 3 ceramide types in this particular ratio, because that strategy itself is often published in peer-reviewed dermatology research that predates any single brand's product, meaning no one company can really claim to own the underlying science, even if their specific product popularized it. That's genuinely good news for you as a consumer, even if it might feel a little uncomfortable for the original brand that did the work of popularizing this specific approach and building the audience trust that made it a bestseller in the first place. Effective, well-researched skincare technology becoming more accessible and more affordable over time is broadly a positive thing for anyone trying to take care of their skin without spending a fortune, even if the way it happens sometimes raises legitimate questions about fairness in the industry. If you want me to run this same evidence-based comparison on a different product pair, drop your suggestion in the comments. I'm especially interested in tackling a retinol or a peptide product next, since those categories tend to have more genuinely proprietary technology behind them, which should make for a very different kind of comparison than this one. And if you've tried either of these 2 serums yourself, I'm genuinely curious whether your own experience lines up with what I found here. Drop that in the comments too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.